All right, let's go ahead and start and do a roll call.
Councilmember Crompton,
It'll be late.
Evelyn Baker,
Here.
Kathy,
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Lessons, Keller,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
Seeger,
Here.
Mayor Bell.
Here. Okay.
All right. So at the last work session 2 weeks ago, we talked about the finance department and how to structure it. Council requested another work session on it, a little more information. I provided in my packet a pretty detailed breakdown of expenses, but did not hop too much into revenue. I did have a little bit more time between now and submitting this packet last week of doing a deep dive into the revenue. And to be honest, the effect that adding that much salary to the administrative overhead was more than I figured. So I printed it out. For those of you online, I thought everybody was going to be here today. My apologies. If you look at the packet that was on your desk when you arrived, particularly page 3 at the expenses, the main thing I want to look at is contingency, and that's essentially the money we have left over after everything has been accounted for. If we add in the new expenses from the CFO, personnel costs, cutting back the contracted CFO, adding in the increase in the internal payments, as well as the update in the internal funds or the administrative overhead fee, we actually come out about $10,000 ahead.
And just to clarify, that administrative overhead comes from the utilities?
Correct. That comes from, well, fire's a wash and not really fire, but sewer, water, streets, and electrical. So I'm going to share my screen really quick so those of you online can see.
Do we have copies of what that would do to those utilities?
No, I did not have a chance to dive that deep. But if you go to that second page in that packet, down at the bottom, it's got the change in the administrative overhead. The change for the materials was negligible. Let me go to that really quick. Right here, let's see if I can zoom out. So you can see this first column is what was adopted. The second column is proposed changes with adding this in-house CFO, the increase to the 6% internal payments, and then what that difference is. So there's an increased revenue of about $65,000 total. 35 of that is internal payments. The other 30 is administrative overhead increase. So we would have, I mean, in theory, if this kind of plays out in the timeline I have in my head, and how long we retain the contracted CFO, we would have about an extra $10,000 to work with. Okay. But this is all, again, theoretical at this point.
It's speculating.
Yes, yep. Yeah, that depends on when they're hired, how much we can actually get them for. My concern is that this is budgeted at $80,000, and I don't know if we can get what we're looking for $80,000. And my second question, I guess, for council on this, and if we do go forward, what is council expecting this position to do? Because I don't want to pay somebody $80,000 plus to do accounts payable. I want them focusing on the long-term forecasting and financial stability of the city.
Mr. Seeger has it. Councilmember Seeger?
Yes, thank you. So, yes, I just want to concur with the city administrator. We're hiring a financial officer who would have some supervisory responsibilities, but would have the wherewithal and the skill set to do, forecasting and higher level finance officer services on behalf of the city. So you're right. We're not hiring an accounting clerk for 80 grand. And I'd like to think that if we could prioritize our salary study work that we're getting done, let's front load that work that the consultant's going to do and have them do that analysis and see if we're in the ballpark with that figure. So that would be my one small request. But assuming those numbers generally stay in that ballpark, am I correct in understanding that if we made these changes, we would not have to reduce our community relations officer staffing or pare back the deputy recorder as one of the things kind of laid out? Am I correct in understanding that?
Correct. Like I said, the amount of revenue brought in from the administrative overhead was way more than I was expecting.
Okay, super. Thank you.
I guess I will premise, I do have some concerns about the next budget when we hop into 25-26. We go from paying an estimated partial salary of about 45,000 to 80 or more, as well as increasing the law enforcement contract all the way from 128 to probably 160 grand. So there's probably another, we would stop the contract with now CFO, another 45 grand we'd have to pick up, which again, some of that would be covered by an increased administrative overhead fee, but I don't know if it'd be enough, so.
Councilmember Baker.
So I appreciate your laying out a variety of different options of what the staffing would look at. Like, can I ask you, and I have that same question to you. What would this $80,000 financial officer be doing? So my number one question is, while CFO now CFO seems to be at a higher hourly rate than I love.
Yeah.
But how many hours a week are they working?
Right now, well, I guess since the beginning of contract, they've worked roughly 70 to 80 hours a month.
So that's only,
About
let's say if it was 80 a month, that's 20 a week.
about 20 a week, yeah. And it's very sporadic depending on, they have other clients, as well as what the auditors are requesting of them.
So but they were catching up with
Correct.
some past things.
Yes, we are all caught up. We are waiting for the auditors to finish their end of the 21-22 audit. Once that is done, we'll roll right into the 22-23 audit.
And when you put out for bid to CFO now, did we get other bids?
I did not. I got the recommendation from the outgoing finance officer. I did recommend reference checks, talk to them, talk to their clients, and I moved forward with them. Because of our situation, I wanted to get somebody in sooner than later to move forward.
I'm just gonna be honest with the group here that I'm not necessarily in favor of a full-time $80,000 chief financial officer if the work of that person is not full-time. If the duties you've discussed, some other financial duties were happily added to other staff jobs. I did do some research, the Government Financial Officer Association, did you look at that? They do some consulting.
I know of them. I didn't really dig into what they offer.
I didn't call to see what consulting they do, and I looked in Oregon for those that were rated highly. Strategic Consulting LLC and Singer Lewak. Have you heard of those? I'll email them to you. So if we should stay with an outside consultant, I would be in favor of the RFP. But that it frightens me to bring in somebody at that high salary if we don't have the full-time work for that.
I mean, as I put in my report, they would definitely have enough for full-time work right now. Once we get up and running, I don't know if that'd be the case. Because we have zero infrastructure in terms of long-term planning for the budget, facilities, fleet maintenance, HR planning. We don't have any of that
And what
yet.
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 in your mind, when How many months of time would that take?
If they don't get bogged down in the day-to-day AP, payroll, accounts receivable, utility billing, I would say 6 months, give or take.
Councilmember Seeger.
Yeah, I just want to make the case that, and I would welcome anyone to do this research. But if you go and query cities, communities of our size, with a $10 million budget, with 3 different utilities, including electric utility, and all the financial complexities that we work with, and see if they're using an outside consultant to do their budget and their finance. I welcome you to try that, but my experience is that you're not going to find that. We have more than enough work for a full-time finance officer and then some. I would argue there's more than 40 hours a week of work for a finance officer, and we're still not going to be able to meet all the things that many of us would like to see done in this city. So, and I say that based on 8 years in Gresham, and in 3 cities in another county, watching finance offices do their thing. The work is almost infinite. And the thing about let's say we build a capital improvement plan, which I would be supportive of, but once you build it, then you have to update it. It gets updated every year, and then it looks out 6 years, as an example. So it's not like you build it, well, we're done. No, projects get moved, financing comes available, and then you have to update that. So that's just one example. They're like equipment replacement funds. I'm not sure if we have one of those, but that's something that the finance officer would build in a more sophisticated, city. And many of those, when I was there, none of those things existed because we were very busy just trying to do all the basics of keeping our audits current, keeping the monthly financials current, keeping our bills paid, keeping all the customers, the utility customers happy. That in itself is a large load. And, there's very little doubt in my mind that there's plenty of work every week for, ad infinitum, for a finance officer to take on. And I just think this will be a welcome respite for the city administrator, who's carrying a lot of finance load right now. And, frankly, he shouldn't be doing that. He should be managing all the city services and having a competent financial officer by his side managing that thing. And just one thing to, I've heard this mentioned more than once, it's not my intention. It would be my hope that the city administrator, if we get a financial officer, would not let them get bogged down in that quote day-to-day, minutia. That's what the accounting clerk's for. Every now and then they're going to have to drill in, but by and large, they should be doing these higher level functions that are required in the finance office. But right now I see a finance office that's understaffed. And that's a lot of the reasons why we're in the fix we're in, that we're behind on audits. And, we had a very bumpy budget adoption process, in my opinion. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
I feel like I'm being talked to like a used car salesman. That this is the most wonderful car. This is amazing. Here are all the doodads that you're gonna get. But my concern is, what are we cutting? What is getting cut? So we're increasing the electrical 23,000, and then we also have another 100 grand, 125 grand that has to be paid for McCord Creek. We talked in the budget about how in-house the sewer department was in such disarray with its budget, and now we're stealing $2,000 from them. Like, at some point in time, I love your ideas, Bernard. I love how amazing this is, but what is gonna get cut? What is on the table? We just sat for an hour in May trying to figure out and cut pennies to get a sheriff deputy that was said that we're taking internal payments to repay contingency because we took out money from the contingency to pay for the HR study. And now we're taking this this money to pay for a finance officer? Like, we can't be spending our savings on this. I love this idea. It's amazing. Let's do it. But tell me what we're cutting.
Councilmember Baker.
I have a similar feeling because we need a community liaison. We need more than we had this year, and that person's already gone. When we're talking about our downtown plan and transportation plan, we need somebody, dealing with the buildings that are derelict, dealing with the folks that are hanging out. We're at these derelict buildings. It shouldn't be there. We need that. Yes, we probably need a financial officer. When I spoke to Troutdale Planning, maybe a year ago, they said best thing you could do is have a full-time planner. So we are deficit in many of these staffing jobs that would be fabulous if they were here. We don't have the money. And I do know that so much is put on our city administrator and other cities, maybe not of this size, to have somebody with a job title that you're filling, and all of our staff here. And as you looked at changing job titles, I'm trusting that you discuss with staff and they're comfortable with some of these. So I know that everybody is wearing more job titles than other cities might put on them. And so I appreciate your looking at what is sustainable, what might work. Again, I'm going to go back to now CFO has getting us caught up. But if we're going to continue with an outside consultant, I'm going to push for an RFP and looking at other bids and now that you know what we have, like if we keep them to finish, what they began, then we can be really clear with an outside consultant. This is what we're looking for, and what would that cost be, and what if we want to do some projected things in the future, we could be more clear about that bidding process. Again, and I will go back to pay equity. I have not checked on city financial officers' pay scale. I send often the current pay scales, but I don't. It's really hard to offer a beginning salary of 80,000 when our fire chief is at 65 and he's still below low minimum in the state of Oregon. I don't think that feels good, that we are bringing in somebody, because it was hard to find. We put it out before and saying, oh, sorry, we already did the budget. Yours has to be low while we offer something higher to get somebody new because you're here. And unless you leave, because if our fire chief leaves, we're going to have to offer a higher pay than 65. We're only lucky that he's here at 65. So that's hard for me too. In our city that doesn't have enough of everything, I'm not ready to budget that 80,000.
Councilmember Happy.
All right. I just want to say, first of all, now CFO is a temporary Band-Aid that we implemented when we lost our finance director. It was never meant to be a permanent, solution. Number one. Number two, as far as workload and responsibilities, I think that's a valid question. I would say that as they get into their role and they start digging into our finances, they're going to uncover more and more things that need attention. So to Bernard's point, there's going to be no shortage of work for this person, guaranteed. To your point, Mr. Keller, as far as how do we afford them? How do we know we can't afford them? We thought we couldn't fund the police. We didn't think we were able to fund the sheriff's contract when we were going into the budget review process. All of the recommendations that were made by Mr. Seeger during the budget review process to fund the sheriff's department contract, those were all suggestions that a finance officer would have likely recommended had they been in position. And the only reason why I think our city administrator didn't make those recommendations is because he's trying to do not only the job of running the city, but also prepare the budget. It's just too much. And I think that when we're, originally we were looking at $104,000 for contracted services with now CFO. That's 520 hours at $200 an hour. $520 or 520 hours, that's 10 hours a week. We just heard that they're putting in about 20 hours a week. There's no way we're going to get to where we need to get with only paying this guy 10 hours, a week. So now we're talking 20 hours a week. Well, that means that we're going to be paying $208,000 for a halftime employee. You look at how much it's costing at $80,000, we're looking at $68 an hour roughly. So it is more expensive in the bottom line, but what we're paying overall is much, much less. And I feel like part of the responsibility and role of the finance officer is to present to council and the budget committee a budget that works. So I do think that they're going to go a long ways to find the money to, get the city in a financially solvent position. That's, I'll end there.
One thing to keep in mind, I think the numbers are a little skewed. Because we're forecasting what we'd like to pay now CFO as far as dollars go. In reality, it's way more. So that's, I know, Mr. Keller, you were talking about, 2,000 here or whatever, but like right now, year to date, where are we at for now CFO? 130?
For this calendar year?
For 2024. I know you gave it to me in the
Yeah,
email, but I didn't write it.
Yeah, it's somewhere in
But
there.
it's considerably higher than what's presented or envisioned. And so one benefit for hiring a financial person, it's fixed. They're gonna be here, they're 40 hours a week. We know what we're gonna spend. With now CFO, with a contractor, anybody contracted, they could say, well, we're gonna go 20 hours this week. We're not doing 10. So that's something to keep in mind. Councilmember Sager?
Well, I wanted to give the city administrator an opportunity to answer Councilmember two of his questions. He said, what are we going to cut? And he said that specifically with regards to the electric utility and the sewer utility. I have my thoughts on how to respond to that, but how would you respond to that? Do we need to cut something in electric utility to afford a full-time finance officer? That was my first question, and then we'll talk about sewer.
In the electric department, I don't believe so. I'd have to take a closer look, but I don't think so.
Okay, and then sewer, what I wanted to say is our sewer rates are way, way, way below market. We are not paying the proper amount to run a sewer utility properly. So yes, right now it can't quote afford it, but it would be my intention that this council, after it completes its COSA, we will properly set rates in which the sewer department can afford this and the other things that it needs to afford to be properly run. So, once we get our revenue straight, Councilmember Keller, these conversations won't be so contentious. Right now, our revenues are out of whack. We're not a properly resourced city, and that's why we're having these contentious conversations. We need to get those revenue pieces straight, and then we can function more competently, and the sewer won't be in the red. We won't be behind on audits. All these things that are, unsatisfactory in my book will get resolved once we're properly resourced. That's kind of my long-term vision.
And Councilor Seeger, I think you made a comment back during the budget. Your philosophy is figure out what it costs to run the general fund and adjust the enterprise funds to make that happen. Is that correct?
That's one of the ways to enhance revenue specific to general fund. Yes. But again, that's up to negotiation and conversation. As we learned during the budget process, there are lots of ways to set those administrative overhead, cost allocations. And right now, it's my opinion that we're very much on the conservative side. I think other cities would be a little more generous in setting charges against those utilities to help the general fund be effective and properly manage, the overhead requirements for the city. So I don't want to, pre-assume, but yes, I think that is part of the solution in getting our general fund to a more, stable platform.
Have we have any projection on the 45 new homes?
When they'll be built?
When they'll be built or?
I do not. I thought I would have it by Thursday, but I haven't signed it yet. The final plat should be done this week, and I'm told they are ready to go to start building their first homes.
So
Can I answer that real quick?
Okay.
During the budget season, I was like, oh, I wonder how much that's gonna be. It's only like $40,000. At $400,000 price per home, which their assessed value will not be that. It'll be much lower.
I'm looking at their usage of electricity and that, how much that will increase.
That I've been told that your typical home, 45 homes, would be anywhere between 3/4 to 1 megawatt. Which is roughly, I'd have to do the math, but I'm gonna say million, but it seems way too high. I have to do the math on what that revenue would be for us.
Councilmember Baker?
Have we hired a new paramedic yet?
Working on it. We have an applicant.
We have an applicant. Okay, good. I just want to remind the council, and I will concede, if this is the staff member that we need, I'm trusting our city administrator and the current city staff, because we're talking about increasing hours of a planner, maybe putting an RFP. I know you made some comments. And is that hugely important? Because if we get our development codes and a planner then in place to help us possibly work on some of the derelict buildings downtown, developers making it easier, is that where we need more money? We are paying contract to the sheriff. So a contract position is not that unusual. We are paying contract to our planner. We are paying contract to our TLT tourism support. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, like utilities and maintenance work in the winter, is that contract?
We contract for lineman crews. 'Cause we have to have at least a
So
minimum
it's
amount.
not unusual for us to have a contract, and they love those lineman crews, am I right? Maybe love is too strong, but that sometimes we can get a contract person who cares about the city and will do many of these things. So I'm just saying, with all these other contracts out there, is this the time, is this the place where we're gonna say, nope, we need it in-house? This is the one, not a planner, not a policeman, and still, what are we saying on the community liaison? Where does that fit in with all these projections? That's what I'm putting it out there. This is the piece that y'all think we need.
Councilor Happy.
Councilmember Happy?
I think that's a very valid point. And we do have contracts, but I think that those contracts are for services that are limited in scope or duration. And that's what's really different from this position. And as Mr. Seeger brought up, you wouldn't find another city that has their finance department contracted out. That's a very, it's an important role. To your point about how much are we paying our fire chief, these are questions that I think that a finance officer would help us figure out. How do we fund that? How do we find the money to be able to support raising wages and keeping up? They'd be doing these wage analysis studies and looking long term, 3-4 years down the road, so that we're not, I feel like we have a lot of catching up to do. And once we get caught up, then we need to start planning so that we don't fall behind. So I feel like finance is an important role that touches every aspect of the city. And that's why I guess, in my opinion, it's a little bit different than hiring the sheriff's department to provide additional policing in our community. We've done, we'd love to have police full-time in town, and we've looked at, the cost associated with that, and we're talking $1 million. That's very different than hiring a contracted CFO for $200 an hour, $104,000 a year if it's 10 hours a week, or $200,000 a year if we're talking 20 hours a week, versus $142,000 for having a full-time finance officer.
Councilmember Seeger?
Yeah, so what I wanted to add is to Councilmember Baker's comment, regarding the fire chief, I am with you 100%. We need to have a proper salary study done on that job, and we need to pay him a competitive wage. And again, this goes back to we're under-resourced. So how do we improve the resource, systems that are funding our general fund needs? And that goes back to our finance officer, who's going to help us do that in a more deliberate and comprehensive manner. If you can get this person hired, it will be a huge assistant in addressing many of the things that you're identifying. And so I'm with you on that, but it starts here. And to reiterate Councilmember Happy's comment, yes, it's very common to see small cities with contracted planning services, contracted police services, but not finance office services. That is uncommon, if ever. Cities have their own finance officer because, one, the work is so demanding, and it is a constant flow of requirements that you're managing. And generally, contractors are much more expensive. That's the one exception is police services. Having an in-house police service is much more expensive than contracting out. This is the opposite. We know the difference. In-house is $68 an hour, fully loaded, and contracting it's $200. So, okay, thank you.
So there's a lot of moving pieces.
Can I ask some questions? I've been trying to raise my hand. Is that okay? So I guess my first thing is, what we had a gentleman serving as a finance officer. What was that gentleman doing? Because I guess then following with that, what caused this to happen? Like, where our books were in place, Bernard and I had a conversation that everything was in place. We were ready, we were rocking, and now we're here. So what happened between this time frame of our budget was in place, we were doing really well, we hire a new CFO, and now we're in this huge hole? Like, what? I don't understand how we got here, and I don't understand how this is going to solve the solution. Secondly, or I guess thirdly, we posted for this position prior to. What interest did we get of anything, and how long was it posted?
I think it was posted for at least a month, maybe two. We got 0 qualified applicants.
What were we asking for in qualifications?
2-year degree and I think 3 years experience, if I remember off the top of my head. When our pay range was 70 to 80,000.
Additional questions.
No, I mean, my big ones is like, how did we get to this point?
So I'm not sure what happened before I got here. When I got on board, I was told we were a year behind on our reports. And that Dave, the most previous finance officer, was working on them. But he was bogged down with payroll, assisting with utility billing, accounts payable, all those other items, and was not able to keep up with the audits or any of the other long-term planning. And if you actually look at the job description of the previous finance officer, it doesn't actually mention anything about long-term financing. It focuses on the day-to-day tasks, which, I mean, it was really an accounting clerk position, not a finance officer position.
Councilmember Happy?
Was Dave, he was not in place when you were hired, right, Mr. Bennett? I think he came on board after you were hired. Is that right?
He had been here for 3, maybe 4 months.
So did he come in when Mary Ann left? Is that kind of the progression as far as personnel went?
For a month or two. I think he started in June of 22.
And so just to be clear, we were a year behind on our reconciliations at the time when you started, and our audit was behind 3 years. Is that right?
No, I think at that point, trying to remember now, if we would have been 21, 22 audit, So at that point, we actually weren't behind. It's since then that we have gotten behind. Whatever progress Dave did not make in doing the audits, and then the transition between losing our auditor and a new CFO and getting bogged down in that is where the additional delay has come in.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question I wanted to bring up, just, and everybody may be aware of this, I don't know, but it was brought to my attention. I guess let me phrase this as a question. Is now CFO municipal accounting, is this their specialty?
I know they focus mainly in private, but they do municipal. They actually helped the county out for quite a few years. And they
Hood River County?
Yeah, Hood River County. They still may be a client, I'm not sure, but that's the reference I used. One of the references I used when they were suggested, and they gave glowing reviews of now CFO.
And our Mr. Bondi that we have, does he have experience doing municipal accounting prior to this?
Most of his experience is private that I'm aware of. Yeah,
Thank
which
you.
is, I'll be honest, not something I'm super excited about that they gave us an accountant that has limited municipal experience. So
I think, yeah, it's just noteworthy that, it is very different public, municipal accounting versus private accounting, and also on top of that, the fact that we have utilities that we're also trying to operate, it is complicated. And I think that's noteworthy.
Councilmember Seeger?
Yeah, just want to clarify. So the work that they did for Hood River County, they didn't hire them to be Hood River County's financial officer leader, did they? Do you know the nature of that work? That was kind of like a one-off, right? Am I correct in understanding that?
from my understanding, they were in a worse position than we currently are or were, and we're helping them dig out of the hole. I don't think it was their their finance head, but assisted the finance department.
Okay.
Yes, I think that was your question.
Okay.
So if I understand you correctly, they had a finance officer at the county and they were brought now CFO in as additional labor to get them caught up on tasks that they were behind on.
I believe so, yes.
Thank you.
That makes sense.
Councilmember Baker?
I know that the three that I looked at, Government Financial Officer Association had a consulting service, Strategic Consulting LLC, and Singer Lewick, all were government consulting. And one of them, the last two, I can only remember Yamhill County, a couple of other counties. So if we do choose to look at RFP and other agencies, I'll share that with you. And or what is the idea? Is it possible to be a part-time financial officer, 20-hour a week?
It's possible. I highly doubt we might get somebody. It'd be a difficult recruit.
Sometimes at that higher pay, people either, they're, you're right, probably for in-house, but independent consultant work, they might do that, or
I mean, one benefit we do have, given this type of work and the technology, is this position could be remote, probably 90% of the time, and come in as needed. I mean, so there's that benefit, not having to commute to Cascade Locks.
Can I hear, Butch, I want to hear your opinion. Like, what are you thinking? I'm lost.
Well, I'm looking at, right now, looking at another government entity that's small like us, and there's also a utility. So I wanted to see if they have a CFO or if they still have theirs.
But where are you leaning?
Where am I at on this whole thing?
Yeah.
Well, I would like, I know we are 3 audits behind. And an audit isn't completed until it's presented to this council and it's approved. The amount of money that we have spent, we've done too many uh. Studies or whatever, and we've let it get away, and we've let this CFO company run too much with a lot of money. And I think we need to cut them loose, and we need to get somebody else on board that at less of a price.
In the city, finances are very, very important. Very
Yeah.
important. It's the hub of everything. If we don't have proper money for anything, it's a slippery slope. Part of it for years, things haven't been raised. Things that, we've got inflation. Financially, the city's drowning. We're doing okay. We've got a budget. We're staying on top of it, but there's got to be a point somewhere where we have to say, these are what we need. This is what we need to order a bunch of. Then we got to figure out how we're going to do it. A temporary employee, like now CFO, somewhere it's a lot of money, and we're forecasting what we wish or think how many hours. But in reality, the amount of hours, it's going to take a full-time person to dig us out. And at least if we had a full-time financial person, then at that point, we know exactly what we're spending. It's not going to be, oops, sorry, we're at 200,000 this year. We're 60,000 over budget. We know exactly where we are. They will be able to help us for so much planning. Historically, there hasn't been any contingency funds. What happens if we need a new backhoe in 10 years? All the fire department equipment is very old. Well, except for our new ambulance. I'll take that back. But there's so many things that have to be fixed, and it all revolves around money. So I do believe that it's a benefit to have an in-house person who's here vested in Cascade locks, who has knowledge of the city, knowledge of it, all the finances. So that's where I'm at. Councilmember Happy?
Just two things. One, I wanted to also say that the last time we advertised this position, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Bennett, but I believe at that time we were running 5 days a week. And so now we've switched to a 4-day work week. And one of the reasons why we did that is to try to make the city a more attractive place for people to come and work. It was a recruitment tool. Was that right, Mr. Bennett?
Yep.
So I think that it's, we advertised it last time, 70 to 80,000. I propose we advertise it 80 to 90,000 4-day work week. I think it's a very different recruitment process, with that picture in mind. Mr. Keller, I felt like, I don't remember what meeting it was, but your comments were like very compelling when you talked about the city's finances were at an inflection point, and we got to do something. We can't continue to just have Band-Aid on top of Band-Aid, right? And our CFO was a Band-Aid. It's not a permanent long-term solution. And so I'm really grateful for the participation and conversation we've had this evening about this topic. But I just want to remind us of that comment that you made, and I think that it was well said. And we definitely need someone that's got a longer vision, that has more history with us. It's not a part-time job. This is their full-time job, and they're fully vested in helping the city be successful.
Councilmember Happy, I think that's a good point about the work week, a little bit more attractive, and then also maybe with the option that they would be able to work remotely, possibly so many days a week or hours. So that I know a lot of individuals these days, if they can get a job remotely, they'll nab it. So would be an added bonus. Councilmember Compton?
Are we, because every time we talk about, yes, it would be great if we could stop using the CFO now and find somebody cheaper to do the job. But is it realistic to find someone cheaper? Someone cheaper at full time. I mean, like, I know that CFO now has it's unknown at how much we're gonna spend on them. It could be what we budgeted, it could be over what we budgeted. But if we are guessing maybe in the middle of those two numbers, is that like where we're hoping to find this financial director? And I mean, we can't stop doing the audits with this. We have to keep the CFO now on until we are find somebody. So are we gonna be able to make a transition when we're paying for a financial director and the CFO now, because there's gonna have to be an overlap.
Yeah, there'll be some overlap, and we can cut back the scope of work even more that now CFO is doing to where they're only working on the audit and getting current staff trained on processes. Which they're currently doing to help do the monthly reports, bank reconciliations, continue that, but cut back the amount of hours that now CFO is doing.
And if we do all that, then we might squeeze in a budget line that if we pull some here and take some there and. Cause when I look at this, I see like cutting positions and like one position, maybe it's not such a loss, the community liaison, because I mean, we'd love to have one, but if it's that or a financial director, I would rather have a financial director, but when there's the deputy reporter, I mean, we don't have much staff right now anyway, and cutting the deputy reporter would be a huge hit to our city, just from internal knowledge, and trading one thing for another is not necessarily what I would want to do. I mean, having a position that's already currently empty and is limited in how much is like a part of that, but
You missed the first part of the meeting when we talked about not having those.
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just.
Correct, yeah, there's the packet on your desk that the adjustment for the admin fee was more than I anticipated, so. For
That's good.
this fiscal year, we'd be fine not eliminating a position. Carrying it forward into next year with an increased salary and adding to the sheriff's contract is another question that requires a little more research. But we got 10 minutes till the council meeting, and I would love an answer tonight so I can move forward with things. So I'd like to propose at this
I'd
point.
like to hear from Mr. Saker first.
Yeah, so the only thing I wanted to say with regards to Councilmember Constance's comment, the reality of the CFO now contract, there is no cap. If they work, 3,000 hours, then we pay 3,000 hours times whatever, 175 an hour. If you have a full-time employee, there is a cap. It's capped at 240 hours, 2,440 hours for the year. And if we have to work them overtime, then it's a salary job. So just keep in mind the in-house finance officer does have a maximum. The CFO contract technically does not have a maximum. So just keep that in mind. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to propose adding this as an item to vote on the agenda on how council would like to move forward. Because this is a large adjustment to the budget, I'd like your approval to either keep contracted or move forward with an in-house. With the direction, I think Bernard, I think you mentioned it, completing this analysis with the HR consultant to make sure we have a good job description as well as a good base salary to start the recruitment.
Exactly. Thank you.
And then also at some point, we would come back once that is settled with an actual budget amendment.
Be in consensus.
So this is, you want to bring this to a vote, but keeping a contracted CFO doesn't mean keeping now CFO. is there time in your life to reach out?
I can put one together, yeah, an
To
RFP.
reach out, so, yeah, so there's that as well. Cause I take to heart some of the things you wrote that, you know,
I guess what I'm hearing is like, let's get the job description done, let's get it posted, like, let's get this person in-house now. Like, and that's what I'm hearing.
I mean, I personally.
I don't think
we-
there's time for an RFP.
Correct, we would be fine continuing with a contracted CFO, but at this point, I'm at a standstill on several projects until this gets figured out. So once it's figured out, with hopefully a vote tonight, I can move forward.
tonight? You mean a vote of what?
If we're keeping a contracted CFO or you want me to hire somebody in-house. Because it is such a big adjustment to the budget, I would like your approval.
Right, but I don't think we can vote on it tonight.
You can add it to the agenda.
Without 24-hour notice to the public.
It's just an amendment to the agenda.
Councilmember Miller?
I prefer to at least wait till the next meeting. So public is informed of what is going on.
Because you can continue with the CFO, I mean, with now CFO for whatever you need now, can't you?
Yeah.
You have to give them a 30-day warning.
30 or 60, I don't remember what it
Yeah.
is, yeah.
It's
So
at
I
60.
think,
I don't remember off the top of my head what it is.
I think holding it off till the next meeting then would be more appropriate.
I think I'm in agreement with Mr. Councilmember Miller. I'd like to see it, yes, it needs to be an action item, but I think it needs to have proper notice. If it's something that they have to be voting on. Mr. Sager?
So is it an option for us to give direction to the city administrator to begin the analysis to hire a full-time finance officer? So we're just giving him direction, but then at our next meeting, as proposed by Councilmember Miller, we actually take a formal action to that effect. Is that an option? Because I feel like the city administrator, he wants to get some direction from us so he can start working this issue. If there's consensus among this group that we want to hire a financial officer, then is there an issue with us saying, begin that process and we will formally vote on that at our next meeting? How do folks feel about that?
That we could do. We could do.
Is there any time in your life to, if I send you those 3 that I researched, to just check in? Or is
Yeah,
that?
I can reach out to them.
Okay. So we can hear, because all we've ever heard is, and seen the cost of a contracted financial officer is now CFO. We never did an RFP.
Correct.
Right.
So in the interest of time, we've got 5 minutes before we start the regular meeting. Would it be fair to say consensus, is it okay if Mr. Bennett looks into gathering more information from Chief Financial Officer? And then get it on the agenda, which way to go?
I would like it to be basically have everything ready to go. Prepared, RFP, paperwork ready to go, and then if the vote goes one way, then we can just put it out the next day. Or not.
Yeah, I can work with the HR consultant. I can build at least a draft job description, a general salary range, an org chart, how a new org chart would look for approval for council to move forward with next week. And I will also follow up with RFPs as well. Or at least try and find a general cost of what other CFO services would be.
How does that sound? Good?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Let's go ahead and end this meeting, and we've got 3 minutes to.
All right, those of you online, I'm going to end the meeting and open up the new one. Thanks.